Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we turn to talking about a new version of the Monopoly board game called Miss Monopoly, and it has a very interesting rule set that's certainly going to make a few heads turn. In an effort to pander to social justice warriors and to virtue signal about their wokeness, Monopoly's company Hasbro has decided to make a female-centric version of Monopoly called Miss Monopoly. Miss M will not only be catered to and directed at a more female audience, but also the game will have rules within itself that will give girls artificial advantages that are based on long debunked lies about the workplace and American society. First, let's look at this tweet from CNN, which spells out the new girl favoring rules. It says, unlike the classic game, women will collect 240 Monopoly bucks when they pass go, while male players will collect the usual 200. It's a fun new take on the game that creates a world where women have an advantage often enjoyed by men, the creator said. Well, I have to say, my curiosity is certainly peaked here. What is this illustrious advantage men have over women anyway? Because while I can admit there are certainly differences in between the sexes, I would hardly call it an obvious advantage which men certainly enjoy without question and without a doubt in all situations. I mean, CNN and Hasbro are both assuming this advantage to be so true, they don't even bother explaining what it is here. And I've read the full attached article and Hasbro's announcements too. There's nothing even listed here as a reason why men have this so-called advantage. I guess we can assume this goes back to the long debunked gender pay gap myth or something, or perhaps it's a dig at how men happen to be in more popular CEO, innovator-like positions, and there are more males in tech and television too. And we're going to get into why every one of those reasons is wrong too, but first, let's really highlight and bask in the absurdity of what's being presented on its own here, without evidence. There's literally no support for this claim whatsoever. They didn't even try to support it. They just say men have some random advantage because they say so, and needless to say, I'm not too trusting of these sources. Some are even saying this Miss Monopoly game might actually be a parody too, and I could see that being true as well, since this whole thing looks like a complete joke on its own. But at the same time, CNN is reporting on this with absolute seriousness, and Hasbro made a very cringy, overly dramatic ad to go with this too, trying to promote these young female inventors and stuff. Check out this clip.
Back in the old days, women were in the kitchen, women looked pretty on the stage, but now women and girls are building things. So I thought, why not I be the change that I want to see in the world?
So, with all that said, and after seeing that overly serious clip there, I would say it's safe to judge that this whole ad and campaign is serious to me, regardless of the fact that it does look like a complete joke or a possible parody. It honestly looks like something a parody website like The Onion would make, as a way to highlight the absurdity of pro-SJW culture and marketing. I mean, just look at this image from the article again. It has a caption saying, Miss Monopoly is meant to celebrate women's empowerment by giving women a head start in the game. I mean, come on. That's like the opposite of what empowerment actually is. This is really equivalent to giving women a pat on the head, like they're your pet or something. The game is basically saying, since you're a woman and can't win at this game fairly, here's a head start so that the better skilled men don't beat you. And this is also the kind of head start or special treatment that you give to children when you play board games with them, not adult grown-ass women. And this isn't even getting to the fact that the whole premise behind this thing is broken to begin with. In fact, I think this kind of biased pro-female game actually proves the opposite of Hasbro's point. They are claiming to be pro-women and they're giving them special treatment because men have had supposed advantages for years. But really, giving girls special treatment here and in this way is actually nothing new. And women getting favored and hired and promoted and recommended because they're women, well, that's something that's been true in this country and in business for a good long while now. Think about it this way. Do you ever think there would be a major corporation who would pander in this kind of way to men? Let alone would they consider themselves virtuous for doing something like that. Hasbro acts like they're saving the world here too, and they act like they're donating to some sort of charity case when they help the whammons. Seriously, they act as if women are handicapped or have cancer or something, kind of belittling the ladies when you think about it. And sure, advertising towards men obviously happens too, but they don't promote our products to males by telling us we're victims and then also shitting on women. In fact, most pro pro-male advertising involves sexy and positive representations of women in order to draw in the dudes. And at the same time, girl ads in current year involve lying to women and treating them like children and also shitting on the men while they do it. I guess that in part goes to show that women like to shit on men, because why else would advertisers shit on men as a way to attract women? And okay, so we've already went over how women have plenty of advantages of their own. So next, let's talk about this idea that more men in certain industries or jobs or professions implies that there's some sort of sexism there against women. This is certainly a type of pro-SJW talking point that's being assumed here, and it's something that always comes up in feminist rhetoric too. For example, I was previously going to do another video about a very similar issue. Recently, Forbes magazine came out with its list of the top 100 innovators right now. Unfortunately for them though, they didn't realize that list would get backlash because it has far more men on it. Because instead of going with the most obvious and straightforward reason for that, and the true reason, which is there's more men on the top innovator list because there's more men innovating and working in technical scientific fields, but instead of going with this easily provable obvious answer, the radical left-wingers of course blame this all on sexism, implying not only that the men who got onto this list don't deserve it, but also they're saying the whole industry, Forbes, and the world is all sexist against women. And this claim is not something they have ever really proven either, and it's based on a wild and categorically large assumption that is pretty obviously false and not true. Having more men in a certain job, field, or on a certain Forbes list doesn't make that wrong, sexist, or offensive to women. Believe it or not, men are just better at and more attracted to certain types of jobs. Women are too, by the way, and that's why there's always been more female nurses, teachers, or models or strippers. But these female-dominated fields are not offensive to left-wingers, and they're never called sexist by the SJWs either. Really, it's because they just want to force themselves into male spaces, usually because they're going after bigger, better, and more high-profile jobs and careers, and more profitable ones for that matter. I mean, do you ever really hear SJWs calling for more females to be forced into the garbage truck driving profession or into ditch digging jobs? Because I've never heard that, and that's because they don't. They don't want to be put into shitty jobs. They want to be artificially inserted into cushy, high-paying science, tech, and entertainment gigs like being innovators, movie stars, and CEOs of major corporations. So with all that said, more men in a certain career obviously doesn't make that sexist or unfair. Unless you want to say nursing and teaching are also sexist and unfair too. And unless you also want to push for more males to be models and porn stars, and to get paid more than their women counterparts. Because if not, then you're obviously being a hypocrite about all this, and your claims aren't actually true or based on facts either. Lastly, do we even need to debunk the actual gender pay gap anymore? I think we all know that that study does not prove that men make more than women in unfair ways at all, and it's not at the same jobs either. Really, men make more on average because they work more hours at more dangerous jobs. With that in mind, women actually already have all the same opportunities as men, and they could easily start working more and applying for more dangerous and more physically demanding jobs if they wanted to. But the truth is, they don't want to. And that's because the truth is, women don't actually want to work more, and they don't want to work these jobs. As much as SJWs and feminists try and cry sexism about it, and they try and encourage or sometimes force women into certain jobs, well, at the end of the day, girls just prefer to do what they're doing already. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I hold nothing against ladies who want to work less hours at more chill, office-like jobs. I would do the same thing too, and there's no shame in it. In fact, the only people actually shaming women is other SJW women, who are basically telling them that their life choices aren't good enough here. And unless they go and make more money and work these kinds of jobs that they aren't drawn to or interested in, then they treat them like there's some kind of failure and there's something wrong. And while I say this is okay, and the women are doing just fine, women are great in fact, and they have every right to continue doing what they're doing right now. In fact, I think it's noble of the ladies to sit back and let the men take care of them in some ways like this. Most dudes actually don't mind going to work and pulling in some extra hours as a way to support their wife and family and to keep them at home more when they can. Speaking of families, there's an eerie anti-family, anti-children undertone to all of this story, because after all, part of the reason some women make less money and work less hours is because they take time off to have babies and more time off to raise them too. And while I respect that dearly, and I think motherhood is precious and a totally honorable life choice, well, in many ways, this pro-SJW women gotta work more crowd, this bullshit is kind of shaming women into not having kids or having husbands husbands or families either. According to the left, younger generations of women must work more and have careers and lifestyles just like men. And although they don't say this outright here, they are also implying they shouldn't have kids or families or lives outside of work either. And this is only one anti-baby, anti-family angle of the left-wing culture. Combine this with them literally campaigning to kill babies and also outright telling people not to have kids because of climate change, and well, I think it's safe to say there's a clear anti-baby, anti-family angle to all of their side. And this whole women must work more bit is certainly a low-key part of that. And one last reason why the so-called wage gap is nonsense, let's not forget here, men also die sooner on average too. So when women inherit the man's wealth after they die earlier, it kind of counteracts the whole premise of this. Also, let's not forget to include the resources women get when they stay home to raise their children, and the fact that husbands pay the bills while they do that. Plus, there's more alimony and child support given to women on average as well. So it's hard not to admit women are already making a fortune, and they already have so many advantages which are easily provable, so that makes them calling for more advantages, well, that makes them just look greedy, and like they'll pretty much never be happy. In the end, while some thought this Miss Monopoly game would be a cheeky joke on the topic, like what happened with a previous socialist version of the game that came out a few weeks ago, well, I don't think that's the case at all here, because if it was, if this game was actually trying to goof on women and feminists, well, they would have the game banned then, like what they did with that socialist Monopoly. That's right, I'm not kidding. When the leftists found out the socialist version of the game was a big joke and a goof on socialists and their failed ideology, well, that prompted liberals to whine and cry so hard, Hasbro had to pull that game off the shelves. God forbid a company that makes a pro-capitalist game goofs on a socialist economic system that has actually failed over and over again for centuries, by the way. And this just goes to show how radical and pro-socialist SJWs actually are. And it shows how band-focused they are too. Not to mention, it also shows that this Miss Monopoly bullshit is being presented seriously and honestly now, even though its premise isn't even supported by its own creators and promoters. Welcome to current year 2019, guys. The year Hasbro made Miss Monopoly, a game that treats women like they have a handicap. That means they can't compete at board games or at life at an equal level to their male counterparts. What's next? A new version of the game of life, where the women get to cheat on their husbands, divorce them, take the house and kids and half the assets too, and then also get a nice alimony and child support check each month, which the wife will end up using to keep her kids stocked up on overpriced shoes and designer handbags. Wouldn't be surprised if that game happened one day too. What do you guys think? Is Miss Monopoly going to sell well? Do men actually have an advantage over women in the workplace, like what's being implied? And how come women never want equal representation in female-dominated jobs like teaching, or in dangerous professions like firefighters or policemen? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.